October 2024, tech billionaire Marcus Brennan installed security cameras throughout his Seattle mansion to monitor his staff. But what he discovered on the footage one night made his blood run cold. His son's new maid, Elena, was doing something in the child's bedroom that no employee should ever do. Would Marcus call the police? Or would what happened next reveal a truth that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his own family? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. October 2024, tech billionaire Marcus Brennan installed security cameras throughout his Seattle mansion to monitor his staff. But what he discovered on the footage one night made his blood run cold. His son's new maid, Elena, was doing something in the child's bedroom that no employee should ever do. Would Marcus call the police? Or would what happened next reveal a truth that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his own family? Marcus Brennan stood in his corner office on the 42nd floor of the Brennan Tower, gazing out at the Seattle skyline as rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 38, he had everything a man could want. His software company, Next Gen Solutions, had just been valued at $2.3 billion. His mansion in the exclusive Medina neighborhood sat on 3 acres of prime waterfront property. His garage housed a collection of vehicles that would make any car enthusiast weep with envy. But success had come at a price Marcus rarely admitted, even to himself. His phone buzzed. Another meeting in 10 minutes. Another deal to close. Another million to add to the pile. He grabbed his coffee, black, no sugar, exactly as his assistant knew he liked it, and headed toward the conference room. This was his life now. Numbers, negotiations, the constant pursuit of more. It hadn't always been this way. 6 years ago, Marcus had been different. He'd laugh more, worked less, and actually ate dinner at home. That was before the company exploded, before the acquisition offers started flooding in, before he realized he could build an empire if he just pushed a little harder, and before his wife, Catherine, died. The car accident happened 3 years ago. One moment she was driving home from her book club. The next moment, a drunk driver ran a red light. Their son, Ethan, was only 3 at the time, too young to fully understand why Mommy wasn't coming home. Old enough to feel the absence every single day. Marcus threw himself into work after that. It was easier than facing the empty spaces Catherine left behind. Easier than watching his son ask questions he couldn't answer. The company became his refuge, and the mansion became a place he occasionally slept between deals. Ethan was 6 now, being raised primarily by a rotating cast of nannies and housekeepers. Marcus told himself it was fine. The boy had everything he needed, the best schools, the finest clothes, every toy and gadget a child could want. What more could a kid ask for? But lately something had been gnawing at Marcus. Last week, Ethan's kindergarten teacher had called, concerned about his social withdrawal. 2 weeks before that, the boy had started having nightmares. And just yesterday, Marcus had come home early, a rare occurrence, to find Ethan sitting alone in the massive playroom, surrounded by hundreds of toys, playing with none of them. "Daddy," the boy had said, looking up with those wide brown eyes that were so much like Catherine's. "Why don't you live here anymore?" The question had hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "I do live here, buddy. This is my house, but you're never here when I'm awake." Marcus had mumbled something about important work, ruffled the boy's hair, and escaped to his home office. He'd sat there for an hour, staring at spreadsheets without really seeing them. His son's words echoing in his mind. That's when he'd made the decision to upgrade the security system. He told himself it was about safety, about knowing what was happening in his home when he couldn't be there, about making sure Ethan was being properly cared for by the staff. The security company had installed cameras in every room except the bathrooms. Living room, kitchen, hallways, playroom, and yes, even Ethan's bedroom. High definition, night vision, accessible from Marcus's phone at any time. The truth, though he wouldn't admit it even to himself, was different. The cameras were his way of being present without actually being present. his way of watching his son grow up from behind a screen, 42 floors above the city. The new Maid started just 2 weeks ago. Elena Vasquez, 28 years old, came with impeccable references from 3 wealthy families in the area. Her background check was spotless. She'd grown up in a small town in Oregon, studied early childhood education at Portland State, worked as a teacher's aide before transitioning to private household work. On paper, she was perfect. In person, she was unremarkable. Quiet, efficient, kept her head down and did her job. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, minimal makeup, simple clothes. She said, "Yes, sir," and "Right away, Mr. Brennan," and never asked unnecessary questions. She prepared Ethan's meals, kept his room tidy, drove him to and from school in the designated vehicle. Marcus barely noticed her, which was exactly how he preferred his staff, competent and invisible. But Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, who had been with the family since before Ethan was born, had mentioned something odd last week. "That Elena, she's good with the boy," Mrs. Chen had said in her matter-of-fact way while organizing Marcus's dry cleaning. "He actually talks to her. Smiles even. Haven't seen him do that much lately." Marcus had grunted something non-committal and returned to his laptop. If Elena was good at her job, fine. That's what he paid her for. Now, sitting in yet another meeting about yet another acquisition, Marcus found his mind wandering. He pulled out his phone under the conference table and opened the security app. Just a quick check, he told himself, making sure everything was running smoothly at home. The feeds loaded quickly. Kitchen. Mrs. Chen was preparing dinner. Living room empty. Playroom empty. He scrolled through the various rooms, half listening as his CFO droned on about quarterly projections. Then he stopped at Ethan's bedroom feed. The boy was already in bed. It was 7:30 p.m., his usual bedtime. But Elena was there too, sitting on the edge of the bed. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his attention now completely diverted from the meeting. She was reading to him. Marcus frowned. That wasn't in her job description. Her duties ended at 7 p.m. She should have left for the day already. Why was she still there? He watched for another minute. Elena's lips moved as she read from a book Marcus couldn't quite make out on the screen. Ethan was propped up against his pillows, clutching the stuffed elephant Catherine had given him years ago, his eyes fixed on Elena's face. Something about the scene bothered Marcus, though he couldn't put his finger on exactly what. It was too intimate, too familiar. Employees weren't supposed to form attachments. That's what his own father had taught him years ago when Marcus was growing up in a similar household. Staff did their jobs and went home. Boundaries were important. He made a mental note to speak with Elena about professional distance, then pocketed his phone and tried to refocus on the meeting. But that night, alone in his downtown apartment, he'd started staying at the company-owned penthouse most nights to avoid the commute. Marcus couldn't shake the image. He pulled up the security app again and scrolled back through the day's footage. There, 7:15 p.m., Eleanor enters Ethan's room with a book. Marcus enlarged the feed and increased the volume. He could hear her voice now, soft and warm, reading about some adventure with dragons and brave knights. He could see Ethan's face, more animated than Marcus had seen it in months. This had to stop. It was unprofessional. It was creating dependency. Marcus paused the video and stared at his son's expression. When was the last time he'd seen the boy smile like that? When was the last time he'd read to Ethan himself? He couldn't remember. The realization settled over him like cold water, but Marcus pushed it away. He had built an empire. He provided everything his son needed. That had to be enough. It had to be, because if it wasn't, then what had the last 3 years of his life been for? The next morning, Marcus arrived at the mansion at 6:45 a.m., earlier than he'd been home in weeks. He'd told himself he needed to grab some documents from his home office, but the truth was different. He wanted to observe Elena, to see if this bedtime story situation was a one-time occurrence or a pattern. He found her in the kitchen, preparing Ethan's breakfast. Whole grain toast, scrambled eggs, fresh strawberries cut into small pieces. She moved efficiently, her movements practiced and calm. "Mr. Brennan," she said, noticing him in the doorway. She seemed startled but quickly composed herself. "I didn't know you'd be home this morning. Can I prepare something for you?"
"Coffee's fine," Marcus said, studying her.
In the morning light streaming through the kitchen windows, he noticed details he'd missed before. She had kind eyes, the sort that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. There was a small scar on her left eyebrow, barely visible. She wore a simple gold cross on a delicate chain, the only jewelry she ever seemed to wear. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She poured him coffee from the French press, adding nothing, just as he liked it. How did she know that? Had Mrs. Chen told her, or had she been paying attention? "Daddy!" Ethan's voice came from the hallway, followed by the thunder of small feet. The boy appeared in his Spider-Man pajamas, his hair sticking up in every direction. He stopped short when he saw Marcus, surprise crossing his face. "You're home?" "Just for a little while, buddy," Marcus said, feeling an uncomfortable twist in his chest at his son's shock. "I have to grab some files." "Oh." Ethan's face fell slightly, then brightened when he saw Elena. "Miss Elena, did you bring the book? The one about the mouse who wanted to go to the moon?" Elena's eyes flicked to Marcus, a brief flash of something, worry, guilt, crossing her features. "After school, maybe. Right now, you need to eat your breakfast so we're not late." Marcus waited until Ethan was seated at the table, focused on his eggs, before speaking. "Elena, could I have a word?" "My office." Her face remained neutral, but he saw her hands tighten slightly on the dish towel she was holding. "Of course, Mr. Brennan." His home office was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with books he never read and awards he never looked at. Marcus sat behind his desk, immediately regretting the power dynamic it created. But not enough to change it. Elena stood across from him, hands clasped in front of her, posture straight but not rigid, waiting. "I noticed you were in Ethan's room last night," Marcus began, keeping his tone professional. "After 7? "Yes, sir. Your shift ends at 7. "Yes, sir." Marcus waited for more explanation, but she simply stood there, meeting his gaze calmly. He felt a flicker of irritation. "Would you like to tell me why you were working off the clock?" "I wasn't working, Mr. Brennan. I was reading Ethan a story. It took 15 minutes. I don't expect to be compensated for it." "That's not the point. Your job description doesn't include—" "I know what my job description includes," Elena said, her voice still respectful but with an edge of firmness that surprised him. "Meal preparation, light housekeeping in the child's areas, transportation, basic supervision. I fulfill all those duties. The reading is something I do because Ethan asked me to, and because—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Because he needs it." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "I'll decide what my son needs." "Of course, sir." She dropped her gaze. "I apologize if I overstepped. It won't happen again." She turned to leave, but something made Marcus speak again. "Why did he ask you?" Elena turned back, her expression softer now. "Because I mentioned I used to be a teacher. Because he saw me reading during my lunch break one day and asked what book I was reading. Because he's 6 years old and he loves stories, Mr. Brennan. Most children do." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus felt accused, though she'd been careful not to make it an accusation. "That will be all," he said curtly. After she left, Marcus sat in his office for a long time, staring at nothing. He should feel satisfied. He'd established boundaries, reminded his employee of her place. So why did he feel like he'd just failed some test he hadn't known he was taking? He pulled out his phone and opened the security app. Scrolling back through the previous week, he started checking the evening footage systematically. Monday night, 7 to 18 p.m., Elena in Ethan's room reading Tuesday night. 7:12 p.m., Elena in Ethan's room, reading Wednesday. She'd had the evening off. The footage showed Mrs. Chen putting Ethan to bed. The boy's face looked subdued, mechanical as he brushed his teeth and climbed under the covers. Thursday night, 7:20 p.m., Elena in Ethan's room reading Friday night. Another p.m., Elena in Ethan's room, reading every single night she worked without fail, for at least 15 minutes, sometimes 20. Never asking for overtime, never mentioning it to anyone. Marcus pulled up last night's footage and watched the full segment, this time with audio. And the brave knight realized Elena was reading, her voice animated in a way it never was during the day, that the dragon wasn't scary at all. He was just lonely and sad because nobody wanted to be his friend. Like me, Ethan said quietly. The reading stopped. Marcus leaned closer to his phone screen. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Elena asked gently. "At school. Nobody wants to play with me. They say I'm weird because I don't know the shows they watch and I don't have the same toys and—" Ethan's voice got smaller. "And I don't have a mom to make my Halloween costume like everyone else." Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. He'd hired a professional costume company last Halloween. Ethan had gone as an elaborate Iron Man. The costume probably cost more than most families spent on their entire holiday. The boy had seemed happy with it, hadn't he? "I'm sorry you're feeling lonely," Elena said. "That must be really hard. Miss Elena, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. Sometimes I pretend you're my mom, not like really my mom, because I know you're not. But just when you read to me, I close my eyes and pretend." Marcus felt something crack in his chest. Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Your mom must have been a very special person, Ethan, and she loved you so much. Nobody can ever replace her, I know. But I can't remember what her voice sounds like anymore. Daddy took away all the videos because they made him too sad. I try to remember, but I can't." Marcus closed his eyes. He had deleted the videos, all the recordings of Catherine's voice, her laugh, her singing to baby Ethan. He'd told himself it was necessary for healing, for moving forward. He'd never asked if Ethan wanted to hear them. "Well," Elena said softly, "I can't be your mom, but I can be your friend. Would that be okay?" "Yeah, that would be really okay." "Good. Now let's find out what happens to the lonely dragon. I bet by the end of this story, he's going to have at least one friend." Marcus watched his son's face transform, the sadness lifting, replaced by cautious hope, as Elena continued reading. He watched until she finished the story, tucked Ethan in, turned off the light, and quietly left the room. Then he watched Ethan, alone in the dark, clutching his stuffed elephant and smiling. Marcus set down his phone, feeling like he'd been punched repeatedly in the stomach. He'd built an empire worth billions. He'd innovated technology that changed industries. He'd been featured in Forbes, in Fortune, in the Wall Street Journal, and he didn't know his son was lonely. Didn't know the boy couldn't remember his mother's voice. Didn't know that 15 minutes of someone reading stories had become the highlight of Ethan's day. What kind of father did that make him? His phone buzzed. A text from his executive assistant, "Running late for board meeting." Marcus looked at the message, then at the security feed still open on his phone. Ethan and Elena were in the car now, driving toward school. Ethan was chattering about something, animated in a way Marcus rarely witnessed. Elena was smiling, responding, making the boy laugh. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus Brennan called in sick to work. He had footage to watch. A lot of it. And he had the terrible feeling that he wasn't going to like what he learned about himself. Marcus spent the entire day in his home office, door closed, watching surveillance footage. Not just from the past week, but from the moment Elena had started working in his home 2 weeks ago. What he discovered made him feel like he was watching his son's life from the outside, because that's exactly what he'd been doing. Day one, Elena arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, met Mrs. Chen, was given a tour. When introduced to Ethan, the boy had barely looked up from his tablet, offering a mumbled hello. Elena had knelt down to his eye level. Marcus noticed this, the way she made herself smaller, less intimidating, and said something that made Ethan glance at her. The audio wasn't clear enough to hear, but whatever she said made the boy's expression shift from indifferent to curious. Day 3. Ethan had spilled juice all over the kitchen floor. Marcus watched as the boy's face crumpled, clearly expecting to be scolded. But Elena had simply grabbed paper towels, handed him some, and they'd cleaned it up together. She'd made a game of it somehow, because by the end, Ethan was laughing. Day 5, Marcus saw Elena sitting at the kitchen table during her lunch break, a worn paperback open in front of her. Ethan had wandered in, stood watching her for a full minute before asking what she was reading. She'd shown him the cover, something about a boy wizard Marcus couldn't quite see, and Ethan had asked if it was good. "The best," she'd said. "Want to hear the first page?" That's how it started. Day 6, Ethan had asked if she could read more of the wizard book. Elena had explained it might be too advanced for him, but she'd brought a different book the next day, one about a mouse with big dreams. Day 7, the first bedtime story. Ethan had asked tentatively if she could read to him before bed. Marcus watched Elena glance at her watch, calculate something, then nod. "1 chapter," she'd said. "Then you sleep." And it had continued every night since, but there was more, so much more that Marcus had missed. He watched Elena help Ethan with homework, turning math problems into games with candy pieces as counters. He watched her teach the boy how to tie his shoes properly. When had Ethan learned that? Marcus had assumed it was the previous nanny. He watched her put bandages on scraped knees, wipe away tears after bad dreams, sit with Ethan when he was frustrated and angry about things a 6-year-old couldn't articulate. He watched her do all the things he should have been doing. Around 2 p.m., Marcus heard the front door open. Ethan's voice carried through the house. School had ended. He heard Elena asking about his day, heard Ethan launch into an excited story about art class and something involving way too much glitter. Marcus emerged from his office and followed the voices to the kitchen. Ethan sat at the counter, swinging his legs, still talking. Elena was preparing a snack, apple slices and peanut butter, arranged to look like a flower. The boy didn't even notice Marcus standing in the doorway. And then Tommy said his mom could come to career day, and Sarah said her dad was coming, and Mrs. Morrison asked if my dad could come. And I said, "You're always too busy, so maybe Miss Elena could come instead." And Ethan finally noticed Marcus. His mouth snapped shut, his enthusiasm draining away like someone had pulled a plug. "Hi, Daddy." That hurt more than Marcus wanted to admit. "Hi, buddy. How was school?" "Good," the one-word answer. The conversational wall that Marcus hadn't even realized his son had built between them. Elena had gone very still, her expression carefully neutral. She slid the plate of apple slices toward Ethan. "Why don't you take these to the playroom?" "I'll be there in a minute." After Ethan left, Eleanor turned to face Marcus. "Mr. Brennan, about this morning—" "Don't," Marcus interrupted, running a hand through his hair. He felt exhausted, wrung out by hours of revelations. "Don't apologize. I've been watching the footage. All of it." Her eyes widened slightly. "Not guilty," he noticed. "Wary, maybe, defensive. You're good with him," Marcus continued. "Better than good. He trusts you, talks to you." "I can see that. He's a wonderful child," Elena said carefully. "Bright, imaginative, kind. He just needs—" She stopped herself. "Needs what?" She met his gaze directly. "With respect, Mr. Brennan, that's not my place to say. I'm asking you to say it anyway." Elena was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could see her weighing her words, deciding how honest she could afford to be. Finally, she spoke. "He needs someone to see him. Not just provide for him, but actually see who he is, what he loves, what scares him, what makes him laugh. You think I don't see my son. I think you see the son you remember, the 3-year-old who needed physical care and supervision. But he's 6 now, Mr. Brennan. He's becoming a person with thoughts and feelings and fears that are bigger than skinned knees and missed naps. He's dealing with grief he doesn't have the words for, with loneliness that his toys can't fix, with a father who—" She paused. "Who what? Who's grieving too, but won't let anyone help him with it. So he just works and works and works, and doesn't see that his son is drowning right in front of him." The words should have made Marcus angry. Should have made him want to fire her on the spot for the insubordination, for the presumption of talking to him this way. Instead, he felt relief. Relief that someone had finally said it out loud. "I deleted all the videos of my wife," Marcus heard himself say, "after she died. I couldn't bear to hear her voice, see her face. It was too painful. I never thought—" His voice cracked. I never thought that Ethan would need them, that he'd forget what she sounded like. What kind of father does that? Elena's expression softened. The kind who's in so much pain that he can't see past his own hurt. The kind who's human, Mr. Brennan, and makes mistakes. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe start by showing up, she said quietly. Actually being present when you're here. Putting down the phone. Asking questions and listening to the answers. Reading him a story. She smiled slightly. He loves the dragon book. The one where the dragon just needs a friend. Marcus looked toward the playroom, where he could hear Ethan making sound effects for whatever game he was playing. His son, 6 years old, half-orphaned, lonely, and Marcus had been so consumed by his own pain, his own need to outrun his grief through work, that he'd abandoned the one person who needed him most. The career day, Marcus said. When is it? Elena looked surprised. Next Friday. But you don't have to... What time? 10 a.m., but Mr. Brennan, if you're busy... Clear my schedule, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. He was already texting his assistant. I'll be there. He paused. And Elena? Keep reading to him, please. Don't stop because of what I said this morning. Are you sure? I'm sure. In fact, Marcus hesitated, then continued. Would you help me pick out some books? Things he'd like? I'd like to start reading to him too. Maybe we could alternate nights or something. For the first time since she'd started working there, Elena smiled at him. A real smile, warm and genuine. He'd love that, Mr. Brennan. He'd really love that. After Eleanor left to check on Ethan, Marcus stood in the kitchen for a long moment. Then he made a decision. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. David Chen, his IT director. Also, the husband of Mrs. Chen. David, it's Marcus. I need a favor. Those videos I had you delete from my personal cloud 3 years ago, the ones of Catherine. You keep backups of everything, right? Yes, I know I specifically told you to delete them. I know, but do you still have them? Can you restore them? He listened, relief flooding through him. Thank you. Yes, send them to my personal drive. All of them, he paused. And David? Thank you for not actually deleting them. I know you were trying to protect me from myself. Marcus ended the call and walked toward the playroom. Through the doorway, he could see Ethan building something elaborate with blocks, completely absorbed. Hey, buddy, can I join you? Ethan looked up, surprise and suspicion warring on his small face. Don't you have to work? Work can wait. What are you building? A castle for the dragon. So he has somewhere safe to live. Marcus sat down on the floor. When was the last time he'd sat on the floor? And picked up a block. Every good castle needs strong walls. Want to show me how you're building them? And slowly, hesitantly, his son began to talk. The first week of Marcus's transformation was harder than closing any business deal he'd ever negotiated. Tuesday morning, he forced himself to wake at 6 a.m. and have breakfast with Ethan. The boy had stared at him over his cereal like Marcus was a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong house. Are you sick? Ethan had asked. No, why? Because you're here. You're never here for breakfast. Marcus had no response to that. He'd simply sat there, drinking coffee, trying to think of things to say to his own son. The silence stretched between them, awkward and painful, until Elena had mercifully intervened with a question about what Ethan wanted in his lunch. Tuesday night, Marcus came home at 6 p.m. instead of 10. He'd nearly caused a 3-car pileup from other executives when he'd stood up in the middle of a meeting and announced he was leaving. It's 6 o'clock, his CFO had said, confused. Exactly. I have somewhere to be. He'd arrived home to find Ethan and Elena at the kitchen table, working on a school project about butterflies. Ethan had looked up, startled, then quickly back down at his construction paper and glitter. How's it going? Marcus asked, approaching cautiously. Good, Ethan mumbled. He's been working really hard on it, Eleanor offered. He's learned all about the monarch butterfly migration. Did you know they traveled thousands of miles? Marcus had pulled up a chair, genuinely interested despite himself. I didn't, that's incredible. How do they know where to go? And Ethan, unable to contain his newfound knowledge, had started talking. haltingly at first, watching Marcus's face for signs of boredom or dismissal. But Marcus listened, asked questions, and slowly the boy's enthusiasm grew. By Wednesday, Marcus had rearranged his entire schedule. Meetings before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. got rescheduled or delegated. His executive team thought he'd lost his mind. His board members made concerned calls. But for the first time in 3 years, Marcus didn't care what anyone thought about his business decisions. He had bigger priorities now. Wednesday evening, he'd asked Elena to show him the bedtime routine. She'd walked him through it: bath time, pajamas, teeth brushing, then the story. She'd made it look effortless, but Marcus quickly discovered nothing about parenting was effortless. You have to use the Spider-Man toothbrush. Not the blue one, Ethan informed him with the exasperation of someone explaining something obvious. And you brush for 2 minutes? Miss Elena sets a timer. Marcus set a timer. And you have to make sure there's no water on the bathroom floor after bath time, or the floor gets all slippery and Mrs. Chen gets mad. Marcus wiped down the floor. And you have to check under the bed and in the closet for monsters, even though I know they're not real. But you still have to check. Marcus checked for monsters. By the time they got to the actual story part, Marcus felt like he'd run a marathon. He sat on the edge of Ethan's bed, holding the dragon book Elena had recommended, and opened to the first page. "You're not doing the voices," Ethan said after the first paragraph. "What voices?" "Miss Elena does different voices for all the characters. The dragon sounds deep and grumbly, and the knight sounds brave and strong, and the princess sounds really smart." Marcus looked at the words on the page, then at his son's expectant face. He was a billionaire CEO. He'd given presentations to thousands of people. He'd negotiated with the toughest investors in Silicon Valley, and he was terrified of doing character voices for a children's book. But he tried. His dragon voice was terrible, somewhere between a bad Darth Vader impression and someone with a terrible cold. But Ethan giggled. Actually giggled. So Marcus kept going, making each voice more ridiculous than the last, until they were both laughing so hard they could barely breathe. "Again!" Ethan demanded when they finished the chapter. "Read it again. It's past your bedtime, buddy, please. Just one more chapter." Marcus looked at his son's face, flushed with happiness, and felt something warm expand in his chest. "Okay, one more. But then sleep." He read 3 more chapters. He couldn't help himself. When Ethan finally drifted off, still smiling, Marcus sat there for a while longer, just watching him sleep. Catherine used to do this, he remembered. She'd sit by Ethan's crib for hours when he was a baby, just watching him breathe. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered to the empty room, not sure if he was apologizing to Catherine or to Ethan or to both of them. "I'm so sorry I forgot how to do this." He found Elena in the kitchen, cleaning up dinner dishes, even though it was well past her shift end. "You should go home," Marcus said. "You've been here since 7 this morning, just finishing up." "How did bedtime go?" "My dragon voice needs work," Elena smiled. He loved it. I could hear him laughing from down here. That's the most important part. Marcus leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. "How do you do it?" "Make it look so easy." "It's not easy," Eleanor said, drying her hands on a towel. "Parenting never is, but you care and you're trying. That's what matters. I wasted 3 years. You survived 3 years. There's a difference. You were drowning in grief, Mr. Brennan, and you did what you had to do to keep breathing. That doesn't make you a bad father. It makes you human. You keep saying that, humans, like it's an excuse, not an excuse. Just a fact. Humans make mistakes. Humans get overwhelmed. Humans grieve and struggle and sometimes lose their way." She folded the towel carefully. "But humans can also find their way back. That's what you're doing." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something personal?" Elena tensed slightly but nodded. "Why did you stop teaching? Your references said you were excellent in the classroom. Why private household work?" Her expression shuttered, the warmth draining from her face. "That's complicated. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. No, it's..." Elena sighed. "I lost someone too. My younger sister. She was 10. Leukemia. I was working as a teacher's aide, and I had to take so much time off to be with her during treatments to help my parents. The school was understanding at first, but eventually, she shrugged. They needed someone reliable, someone who could be there every day. I couldn't be that person. I'm so sorry. After she died, I couldn't go back to the classroom. Too many children, too many reminders. Private work felt more manageable. One child, one family. I could focus all my energy there. She met his eyes. Maybe that's why I understand what Ethan's going through. I know what it's like to lose someone who's supposed to be there forever. Marcus felt a new understanding of the woman standing in his kitchen. She wasn't just good at her job. She was someone who'd walked through fire and came out the other side, carrying her scars, but still capable of extraordinary kindness. Thank you, Marcus said, for not giving up on him. On us, I won't, Elena promised. As long as you need me. That night, Marcus went through the restored videos on his computer. Hours of footage. Catherine singing lullabies, reading stories, playing peekaboo with baby Ethan. Catherine laughing at something off camera. Catherine talking about her dreams for their son. He cried watching them. 3 years of tears he'd been holding back, finally released, but he also smiled. Because she'd been real, vibrant, full of life. And Ethan deserved to remember that version of his mother, not the absence she'd left behind. The next morning, Marcus called Ethan into his office before school. I have something for you, he said, pulling up a video on his computer. Come here. Ethan climbed onto his father's lap, and together they watched Catherine singing a silly song about a monkey who loved bananas. Ethan's face transformed as his mother's voice filled the room. Recognition, joy, pain, love, all flooding through him at once. Mommy, he whispered, reaching out to touch the screen. Yeah, buddy, Mommy, I found all the old videos. We can watch them whenever you want. I should have never taken them away. Can we watch more? As many as you want. They watched videos until Elena called out that they'd be late for school. As Ethan reluctantly climbed down from his lap, he threw his arms around Marcus's neck. Thank you, Daddy, thank you, thank you, thank you. Marcus held his son tight, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo, feeling the fierce beat of his small heart against his chest. I love you, Ethan. I'm sorry I forgot to show you that. But I'm here now. I promise I'm here. I love you too, Daddy. After they left, Marcus sat in his office staring at the paused video of Catherine's smiling face on his screen. He'd spent 3 years running from this pain, thinking that if he just worked hard enough, achieved enough, provided enough, it would somehow be okay. But he'd been wrong. Success wasn't a shield against grief. Money couldn't fill the holes left by absence. The only thing that mattered was showing up, being present, choosing love over fear. Even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. Marcus pulled out his phone and sent a text to his assistant. Clear my schedule for next Friday at 10 a.m. Career day, non-negotiable. Then he opened his email and started drafting a message to his executive team. It was time to make some changes to how this company ran, starting with a new policy about work-life balance that he should have implemented years ago. If the CEO couldn't be there for his son, how could he expect his employees to be there for their families? It was time to practice what he'd failed to preach. Career Day arrived with the kind of autumn sunshine that made Seattle feel almost magical. Marcus stood outside Ethan's classroom, straightening his tie for the 3rd time, more nervous than he'd been for any board presentation in his life. Inside, he could hear children's voices, excited chatter about whose parent did what. Through the window, he saw Ethan sitting at his desk, picking at his fingernails, a nervous habit Catherine used to gently correct. Mrs. Morrison, the teacher, opened the door. Mr. Brennan, we're so glad you could make it. Ethan's been talking about this all week, had he? Marcus felt a surge of warmth mixed with guilt. How many other things had Ethan been excited about that Marcus had missed? When he walked into the classroom, 20 pairs of small eyes turned to stare at him. But Marcus only cared about one pair, Ethan's, which lit up like Christmas morning. That's my dad, Ethan whispered loudly to the boy next to him, unable to contain his pride. He came. Marcus took his place at the front of the room, and for the next 30 minutes he talked about technology, about building companies, about solving problems. But more importantly, he listened. He answered questions from curious 6-year-olds about everything from how many computers do you have, to do you have a robot at home, to what's your favorite dinosaur. He'd said Triceratops, which made Ethan beam because it was his favorite too, something Marcus hadn't known until that moment.
After the presentation, parents mingled over cookies and juice boxes. Marcus found himself actually enjoying conversations with other fathers and mothers, swapping stories about the challenges and joys of raising first graders. "You're Ethan's father?" one mother said, approaching with a kind smile. "I'm Sarah's mom. Our girls have been asking if Ethan could come to her birthday party next weekend. He seems a bit shy about making friends, but Sarah really likes him." Marcus looked over at Ethan, who was showing another child something in a book, his face animated in a way Marcus was still getting used to seeing. "He'd love that. Thank you for inviting him." On the drive home, Marcus had taken the whole day off. Ethan couldn't stop talking. "Did you see Tommy's face when you said you met the guy who invented that game app? And Mrs. Morrison said your presentation was the best one? And Sarah invited me to her birthday party. Did her mom tell you? Can I go, please?" "Of course you can go. We'll pick out a great present for her." "Together?" "Together." They stopped for lunch at a diner Ethan picked. Not some upscale restaurant, just a regular place with good grilled cheese sandwiches. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd had a meal that didn't involve a business discussion or a networking opportunity. He was perfect. "Daddy," Ethan said, drawing circles in his ketchup with a French fry, "are you going to keep being home more? Or is this just for today?" The question struck Marcus in the chest. His son had learned not to trust that good things would last. Marcus had taught him that. "I'm going to keep being home more. I promise. I've made changes at work so I can be here for breakfast and dinner and bedtimes, especially bedtimes." "What about the dragon voices?" Marcus grinned. "Especially the dragon voices." Ethan smiled, but there was still hesitation in his eyes, the kind of caution that comes from being disappointed before. "Miss Elena says promises are important, that you should only make them if you really mean them." "Miss Elena is right, and I really mean this one, Ethan. I know I haven't been there for you the way I should have been. I was so sad about losing Mommy that I forgot you were sad too. And you needed me, and I wasn't there." Marcus reached across the table, taking his son's small hand. "But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." "Do you still miss Mommy?" "Every single day. But you know what I realized? Missing her doesn't mean we have to stop living. She'd want us to be happy, to laugh, to have adventures. She'd want me to be your dad, not just someone who pays the bills." Ethan was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, "I'm glad you came to Career Day." "Me too, buddy. Me too." That evening, Marcus found Elena in the kitchen preparing dinner. Mrs. Chen had gone home early, something about a doctor's appointment, so Elena had volunteered to cover. "How was Career Day?" she asked, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "Better than I expected." He was proud I was there. I could see it on his face. I never realized how much that mattered. Everything matters when you're 6. Every moment, every gesture. They're building their understanding of the world, of their place in it, of whether they matter to the people they love. Marcus set down the pepper, watching her work. "I wanted to talk to you about something. A proposal, actually." Elena's hands stilled. "If this is about my hours, Mr. Brennan, I'm happy with the arrangement we have." "It's not about that. It's about Ethan's education, his development." Marcus pulled out a chair, gesturing for her to sit. "You were a teacher. You understand child development in ways I never will. And you've been incredible with Ethan, not just as a caretaker, but as someone who actually helps him grow, learn, think. That's kind of you to say. I'm not being kind. I'm being factual, which is why I want to offer you a different position, not as a maid, but as Ethan's full-time private educator and companion. You design his learning experiences, coordinate with his school, help him with homework, encourage his interests, be the consistent, positive presence he needs. Elena stared at him. Mr. Brennan, I don't have a teaching certificate. I was only an aide. I don't care about certificates. I care about results. And the result is that my son trusts you, learns from you, and lights up when you're around. That's worth more than any credential. He named a salary that made her eyes widen, plus full benefits, your own space in the house if you want it so you don't have to commute, anything you need. That's incredibly generous, but I need to think about it. Of course, take all the time you need, but Elena, Marcus met her gaze, this isn't charity. You've already changed our lives. I'm just asking you to keep doing it, officially. Over the next week, Marcus discovered new rhythms. Morning breakfast conversations, afternoon homework sessions where he learned about butterfly migration and the water cycle, evening stories with increasingly ridiculous character voices, weekend trips to museums, parks, the aquarium. He also started therapy, something his attorney had been suggesting for years. It was time to actually process Catherine's death instead of burying it under work and achievement. Elena accepted the position. The day she said yes, Ethan had thrown a spontaneous celebration, insisting they have ice cream for dinner. Marcus had agreed, much to Mrs. Chen's horror and Elena's amusement. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his home office looking at the security camera app on his phone. He'd kept the system running, but now he used it differently, not to monitor and control, but to catch moments he might otherwise miss while at work. Today's footage showed Ethan and Elena in the playroom, working on a science project. They were building a volcano, getting more baking soda on themselves than in the experiment. Their laughter echoed through the speakers. But there was another figure in the frame now, Marcus himself, arriving home at 5:30, loosening his tie, sitting down to join their project, adding too much vinegar and making the volcano overflow, all three of them scrambling to clean up the mess, laughing the whole time. Marcus closed the app. He didn't need to watch from a distance anymore. He was living these moments now, creating memories instead of just observing them. His phone rang. The CFO, calling for an urgent meeting. Can it wait until tomorrow? I'm helping my son with a science project. There was a pause. You know what? It absolutely can. Enjoy your evening, Marcus. Marcus smiled and headed toward the playroom, where he could hear Ethan calling for him to come see their latest attempt. That night, after Ethan was tucked in, Marcus and Elena now alternated bedtime duties, both doing character voices that made the boy giggle. Marcus found himself alone in the living room, holding the stuffed elephant that had been Catherine's gift. We're going to be okay, he whispered to the memory of his wife. All of us. It took me too long to figure out how to keep living, but I think I've got it now. I hope you're proud. Elena appeared in the doorway, ready to head home for the night. Everything all right? Yeah, just thinking about how close I came to missing everything that matters. If I hadn't seen that footage of you reading to Ethan, if I'd just fired you and enforced my rules about professional distance, I would have lost him completely. But you didn't. You saw what needed to change, and you changed it. That takes courage, Mr. Brennan. Marcus. Please call me Marcus. She smiled. That takes courage, Marcus. After Elena left, Marcus pulled up one more video on his phone. Not surveillance footage this time, but a recording from earlier that day. He'd started documenting moments with Ethan, building a new archive of memories. In the video, Ethan looked directly at the camera, gap-toothed smile wide. Hi, future me. Today, Dad came to my science fair, and I won second place. We celebrated with ice cream. Dad says we can watch Mommy's videos tonight. I love my family. Marcus saved the video to the cloud, backed it up twice, and made a mental note to show it to Ethan when he was older. So he'd always know that even when things seemed darkest, love could find its way back. because that's what my family did. They stumbled, they fell, they lost their way. But if they were lucky, if they paid attention, if they asked for help, if they chose to show up, they found their way home again. And home wasn't a 3-acre mansion with waterfront views. Home was wherever your people were. The ones who saw you, who read you stories, who made ridiculous dragon voices and celebrated volcano explosions. Home was right here. Finally. Marcus turned off the lights and headed upstairs, already thinking about tomorrow's breakfast conversation and which book they'd read tomorrow night. He was exactly where he needed to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.